When people hear the words African president, their minds often jump straight to stories of luxury mansions, fleets of expensive cars, offshore bank accounts, and unimaginable wealth hidden away while the majority of citizens struggle to survive. For decades, this has been the image that many corrupt leaders on the continent have reinforced through their lifestyles. But then, along comes Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, and suddenly that entire narrative is shaken. His net worth and salary are not only surprisingly low, but have left many Africans and even the wider world stunned. And for the corrupt leaders who thrive on excess, it's more than just surprising, it's humiliating. There is something almost unbelievable about hearing that a sitting president in this modern era could be living such a simple life, one without flashy possessions or excessive indulgences. Most presidents around the world, especially in regions with unstable economies, are known for inflating their salaries or ensuring that perks keep them comfortably beyond the average citizen's reach. Yet Traoré, barely in his mid-30s, seems to have chosen an entirely different path. It feels refreshing. It feels rare. Perhaps most importantly, it feels genuine. People are not just talking about his policies anymore. They're talking about his humility. Imagine being an African citizen in a country where poverty is a daily battle. Then you find out your president's official salary and personal net worth look nothing like the mansions and Rolls Royces of neighboring leaders. That alone is enough to stir emotions. For some, it brings hope. For others, it sparks disbelief. Could it be true? Is there really a leader who is not using power as a tool for personal enrichment? These are the questions that ordinary Africans have begun asking. The moment numbers surrounding Traoré's net worth started circulating, social media exploded with reactions, memes, jokes, and genuine admiration. It was a cultural moment that captured attention far beyond Burkina Faso. Think about the contrast for a second. On one hand, you have leaders on the continent who hide millions, even billions, in foreign accounts while their citizens live without electricity or basic health care. On the other hand, you have Traoré, who seems almost unbothered by wealth, almost detached from material greed. And it's not that he doesn't have the power to change his situation. As president, he could easily approve enormous budgets for himself, award unnecessary allowances, or even just quietly pocket money under the radar. But he doesn't. That choice, that restraint, is what shocks people the most. It's not just about how much he has, it's about how little he has chosen to take compared to what he could have taken. When a young African scrolls through the news and sees that Traoré's net worth looks closer to that of an average working man than a billionaire mogul, it sends a message. It says, leadership doesn't have to be about excess. Power doesn't always have to corrupt. That, in itself, is revolutionary. You can almost feel the sigh of relief in the conversations happening across African streets and online platforms. Finally, someone who reflects the struggles of the people rather than exploits them. Finally, someone who doesn't see the presidency as a lottery ticket to riches, but as a duty to serve, of course. This revelation hasn't been comfortable for everyone. For many corrupt leaders, Traoré's modest lifestyle is more than just a personal choice. It's a mirror that reflects their greed and exposes their hypocrisy. Imagine being a head of state who owns private jets, palaces, and bank accounts, overflowing with stolen money, and then watching the world praise another president for his honesty and simplicity. It's embarrassing. It undermines years of carefully crafted appearances of untouchable power and invincibility. Traoré, without saying a single word, makes them look small. What's powerful here is not just the numbers, but the symbolism. The people of Burkina Faso are living in one of the world's poorest nations. But their president is not pretending otherwise. He's not hiding behind luxury while his citizens carry the weight of hardship. Instead, he is seen as walking closer to their reality. There's an intimacy in that, a connection that money can't buy. Leaders often forget that true respect doesn't come from the cars they drive or the houses they own. It comes from being able to look your people in the eye and say, I am with you in this. And that is what Traoré is doing, intentionally or not. There's also something deeply human about this. We're so used to associating power with wealth that when someone breaks that cycle, it almost feels shocking, as though the rules have been rewritten. You find yourself leaning in, curious, almost suspicious. But then you realize it doesn't have to be unusual. What if more leaders chose this path? What if net worth was no longer a measure of a president's success, but rather their integrity, their ability to serve without draining the very resources their people depend on? That thought alone is powerful enough to change how younger generations view politics. People are emotional about this because it touches something universal. Whether you live in Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Kenya, or even outside Africa, the frustration with corrupt leadership is everywhere. Citizens are tired of seeing leaders live in unimaginable wealth while their children go hungry. So when a story like Traoré'S surfaces, it feels like a spark of light in a dark room. It gives hope, but it also challenges us to rethink what leadership should look like. And maybe that's why the story has gone so viral. It's not just about him, it's about the possibility of a different Africa. You can almost sense the discomfort in the silence of other leaders. They don't want to talk about this. They don't want to be compared. But people are already making the comparisons for them, openly and loudly. The internet is filled with side-by-side images, showing Traoré'S modest net worth alongside the staggering billions of leaders who have ruled for decades. It's not flattering for the old guard. In fact, it's humiliating. And yet, for the people, it's empowering. It proves that the tide may be shifting, that values may be changing, that the younger generation of leaders doesn't necessarily have to inherit the greed of the past. For the citizens of Burkina Faso, it's more than just a viral headline. It's a source of pride. The president has become a symbol of dignity, of resistance against the idea that leadership must equal corruption. And for Africans everywhere, it's a reminder that things don't always have to stay the same, that sometimes the story can change in ways no one expected. When the numbers around Ibrahim Traoré'S net worth surfaced, they didn't just surprise people, they rattled the entire image of what African leadership has come to represent in the public imagination. For so long, the picture of an African president has been painted with symbols of excess-lavish palaces hidden behind high walls, convoys of luxury vehicles, bank accounts swollen with money that never seemed to trickle down to the people. And then suddenly, there's this young man, the leader of Burkina Faso, who lives with so little compared to what people expect from someone in his position. His modest net worth, in one single revelation, has done what years of speeches and protests could not. It has placed a bright spotlight on the greed of those who lead with heavy pockets and empty hearts. It's not just about the numbers on a paper, it's about what those numbers symbolize. President earning and living simply, while still leading a nation. It becomes a mirror that reflects what others are truly doing with their power. Imagine the awkward silence of presidents and ministers across the continent as their people begin to compare. Citizens are now asking, why is Troy not filthy rich when he holds the same kind of office you do? What exactly have you been doing with our money all these years? That is the kind of question that shakes the ground beneath corrupt leaders, because it goes straight to the core of their legitimacy. There's an honesty and simplicity that can't be hidden, and Traoré'S lifestyle has put that honesty on full display. The truth is, he could have chosen a different path. He could have increased his salary, added countless benefits, hidden extra allowances, and no one would have been shocked. After all, that is the script almost every leader before him has followed. But by not doing it, by remaining grounded, he exposes just how much the greed of others is not a necessity of leadership, but a choice. It's a choice to drain the country's wealth for personal gain, and it's a choice Traoré has refused to make. This difference is painful for many of his peers. Leaders who for decades have thrived on untouchable power suddenly find themselves looking smaller next to him. People who own private jets and billion-dollar estates are being compared with a young man whose net worth might not even reach what one of their watches costs. And the thing about greed is it doesn't like being seen for what it truly is. Greed hides behind ceremonies, behind endless speeches, behind patriotic slogans. But all of that crumbles when someone like Traoré steps onto the stage with empty hands, yet full respect from his people. It exposes the hollow core of all that luxury, and the people feel it. Ordinary Africans scrolling through social media can't help but notice the contrast. A leader who isn't living off their backs versus leaders who have been feeding off their sweat for decades. It's almost too striking to ignore. In markets, in taxis, in crowded streets, the conversations have started. If Traoré can do it, why can't ours? That simple question alone carries the power of a revolution, because once people see an alternative, they can never unsee it. There's also something deeply emotional about it. For years, Africans have carried a kind of silent resentment. They have watched their leaders grow richer while their nations sink deeper into poverty. They have seen the same patterns repeated over and over, leaders preaching sacrifice, while they themselves live in unimaginable comfort. And then comes Traoré, not just talking about sacrifice, but living it. His modest net worth isn't just a financial detail. It's a story that ordinary citizens can relate to. It's the kind of story that makes people feel seen, as though their struggles are not invisible to those in power. Greed, when exposed, has a way of making people angry. But it also has a way of making them hopeful when they realize there is another path. By simply existing the way he does, Traoré has managed to pull back the curtain on decades of excess. He hasn't needed to point fingers or call names. The comparison is enough. The greed of others is being revealed, not through accusations, but through the glaring contrast of one leader's humility. That contrast is louder than any speech. It also leaves corrupt leaders scrambling. How do you justify owning fleets of cars when another president leads effectively without them? How do you explain billions in offshore accounts when a man with a modest salary is still able to govern and protect his country? These are the questions that echo louder each day as people become more aware. And the worst thing for a corrupt leader is awareness. Once people begin to see clearly, the old tricks no longer work. In a way, Traoré's modest net worth has become more than a personal detail. It's a weapon, a silent but powerful weapon against greed. It challenges an entire culture of leadership that has thrived on excess, forces the powerful to confront their own choices, and it forces citizens to question what they've long accepted as normal. That is why this revelation feels so heavy, why it stings so deeply for those who have gotten away with so much. The greed of corrupt leaders thrives in the dark, hidden away from comparisons, but Traoré's example shines too brightly. It creates an uncomfortable light where their greed can no longer hide. And maybe that is why so many people are rallying behind him, not just because of who he is, but because of what he reveals in others. His modest net worth has cracked the mask of luxury and shown it for what it really is: theft dressed up as leadership. When people talk about Ibrahim Traoré, it isn't just about his policies, his speeches, or even his military background. What keeps coming up again and again is something far more personal and relatable: his salary. The fact that the president of Burkina Faso earns so little compared to the luxurious standards of other leaders has captured people's imagination. And it's not just about the amount on paper, it's about what that simplicity represents. His salary isn't just numbers in a budget. It's a bridge that connects him to the ordinary citizens of his country in a way that many leaders can only dream of. Think about how rare that is. Most presidents live on a level so far removed from the lives of everyday people that it's almost like they exist in a different universe. Their salaries are bloated, their perks unimaginable, their lifestyles dripping with extravagance that the majority of their citizens will never touch in their lifetimes. And then there's Traoré, living on a wage that feels shockingly normal. Almost humble, it doesn't make him less of a president. If anything, it makes him more human in the eyes of his people. They see him not as a distant figure locked away in golden halls, but as someone who lives closer to their own reality. That connection is powerful. Ordinary citizens feel the weight of poverty every single day. Parents struggle to put food on the table, young people fight for jobs that barely pay enough to survive, and farmers break their backs for harvests that don't always cover their costs. When they hear that their president isn't hoarding millions or living in extreme luxury, but instead taking a salary that feels within reach of reality, it changes the relationship between the people and power. It's as though he is saying, "Without words, I am not above you. I am one of you." And that is something money can't buy. You can feel the difference in the way people talk about him. There's pride, but also relief. Pride that their leader is not exploiting them, and relief that for once, power doesn't automatically mean distance. His salary becomes a symbol of trust, a kind of assurance that he is not in it for personal gain. Citizens see that paycheck and feel like maybe, just maybe, their sacrifices aren't being mocked by a man who sits in comfort while they suffer. That bond grows in small, quiet ways, through conversations in markets, through discussions in tea shops, through whispers. In crowded buses, they talk about him not with bitterness, but with admiration. It's interesting how something so ordinary can feel so extraordinary in the political world. Salaries should be boring numbers. But in a continent where leaders pay themselves like kings, a simple salary becomes revolutionary. It's an act of solidarity, even if it was never intended to be. And that solidarity builds trust, and trust builds loyalty. A farmer struggling in the sun feels that his president isn't completely detached from his hardship. Teacher counting. Every coin at the end of the month feels that the man leading the country also understands restraint. This shared sense of reality creates an invisible but unshakable bond. The emotional connection here cannot be underestimated. People have long felt betrayed by their leaders, and betrayal leaves deep scars. To heal those scars, it takes more than promises, more than speeches. It takes action, and sometimes it takes sacrifice. Traoré'S salary is one such sacrifice, and it resonates deeply. It's not about whether he could take more, it's about the fact that he doesn't. That choice speaks volumes. It says, I am not here to enrich myself. I am here to serve. Those words have been spoken by leaders before, but they ring hollow when uttered from behind the gates of sprawling mansions. Coming from a man with a modest salary, they feel alive, they feel real. And in that honesty, people find dignity. Citizens of Burkina Faso are not fooled by the world's standards of wealth. They know poverty, they know hardship, and they know when someone is living above them at their expense. But when they see a leader who earns simply, they see someone willing to carry the same weight they do, someone willing to share in their struggle. That kind of leadership is not measured in bank balances, but in bonds of trust. It is in those quiet bonds where true power lies. You can sense it in the conversations that spill onto social media. Young people post about it with admiration, sharing memes, comments, and words of respect. Older citizens, often hardened by years of disappointment, find themselves softening to this new leader. And around kitchen tables at night, families talk not with anger, but with a cautious kind of hope. The kind of hope that maybe, for once, the story could be different. Traoré'S simple salary does more than expose corruption. It humanizes power. It strips away the untouchable aura around leadership and brings it back down to earth, where ordinary people can see themselves reflected. This isn't about whether he is rich or poor compared to the world. It's about whether he is fair compared to the reality of his people. And in that fairness, he has carved out a space in their hearts that greed could never buy. When the news about Ibrahim Traoré'S modest net worth and salary spread, it didn't just create a conversation about numbers. It created something much deeper. Something that could be felt in the hearts of people across Burkina Faso, and even far beyond its borders. The revelation became a source of national pride, almost like a collective heartbeat that reminded citizens of their dignity. At the same time, it sent ripples of hope across Africa, where so many people have grown weary of the same cycle of corruption, greed, and disappointment from their leaders. It's rare that a financial detail becomes emotional, but this one did. For the people of Burkina Faso, it was a moment of recognition. Here is their president, not living in excess, not flaunting unimaginable wealth, but choosing to stand closer to their reality. That kind of choice becomes a symbol, and symbols matter more than most leaders realize. It's not about whether a leader wears expensive suits or rides in flashy cars, it's about what those things represent. And in Traoré'S case, the absence of luxury represents closeness, solidarity, and honesty. Citizens can look at him and feel a sense of pride because his life does not mock their struggles. Instead, it reflects them in some small way. You can almost imagine the conversations in the homes of Ouagadougou, where families talk about their president with smiles instead of sighs. Fathers tell their children that their leader is not like the others. Mothers say, look, he lives simply, just like us. Young people, who often feel alienated from politics, share his story on social media, not because they're told to, but because they want to. That kind of pride isn't forced, it comes naturally when people feel represented with dignity. There's also a quiet strength in knowing that the world is watching. For decades, Burkina Faso has been painted as one of the poorest nations in the world, struggling under the weight of challenges both economic and political. But now, suddenly, the story isn't just about hardship. It's about integrity. It's about a leader whose personal choices shine a light on something positive, something inspiring. For citizens, this change in narrative matters. To see their country associated not just with poverty, but with pride and honesty is powerful. It allows them to hold their heads higher, to feel that they are part of something worth celebrating. Across Africa, impact is just as strong, though perhaps more complex. For years, people across the continent have been let down by leaders who talk about sacrifice but live in abundance. Citizens have grown accustomed to a gap so wide between themselves and their presidents that it feels almost natural. But Traoré'S story shakes that assumption. It whispers the possibility of a different kind of leadership, one that is grounded in reality rather than fantasy. And that whisper spreads like wildfire. In Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Addis Ababa, people are talking. Social media lights up with posts comparing Traoré's lifestyle to the billion-dollar fortunes of other leaders. There's anger, yes, but there's also hope. Hope that maybe this is not just an exception, but the beginning of something new. Hope that the younger generation of leaders might carry forward this model of humility rather than inherit the greed of the past. Hope that leadership doesn't always have to mean distance, but can mean connection. This sense of hope is emotional because it feels long overdue. Africans are not naive. They know the deep scars corruption has left on their nations. They know how many opportunities have been stolen, how much wealth has been drained, how many futures have been lost because of leaders who place themselves above their people. But when someone like Traoré steps onto the scene, young, grounded, and unwilling to enrich himself at the people's expense, it cracks open the possibility of change. And even the smallest crack can let in light. What makes this revelation even more powerful is that it didn't come wrapped in a campaign or a carefully crafted image. It came naturally, quietly, through the simplicity of his lifestyle. That authenticity is why people trusted. And trust is the rarest currency in politics. For people who have been lied to again and again, to finally feel that trust is like breathing fresh air after years of suffocation. It creates energy, it creates optimism, and it creates momentum. In Burkina Faso, that pride manifests in everyday ways. A farmer in the fields feels it when he thinks about his leader not living far beyond him. A student at university feels it when she shares a meme celebrating his modest net worth. A soldier feels it when he realizes his commander-in-chief doesn't live like a king while he risks his life for the country. It becomes a collective sense of belonging, of being seen. And in Africa more broadly, hope takes root in small conversations. People ask themselves, why not us? Why not here? Why not now? Those questions are powerful because they plant seeds of possibility. When citizens start to believe change is possible, it becomes harder for the old ways to hold. The pride of Burkina Faso becomes the hope of Africa. And that hope becomes a quiet challenge to leaders everywhere who think greed will forever go unchallenged. If you believe Africa deserves leaders who serve with honesty instead of greed, then this is your community. By subscribing, you'll stay connected to stories that inspire hope, expose truth, and celebrate the kind of leadership that people truly deserve. Hit the like button. Hey, if you're proud of Traoré's example, drop a comment and share what kind of leaders you want to see in Africa. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss more eye-opening stories that matter to you and your future. Together, your voice makes the message stronger. Let's build a space where truth spreads faster than corruption.